been a really busy Sunday here at the Vedanta Center. I gave a lecture for the center in Washington, D.C. this morning at 8, and then Swami Arupeshananda gave a great lecture, a very practical lecture actually, here in the Vedanta Temple in Hollywood. And it's just got my mind turning around a lot of different ideas, and I want to share some of those and bring some of them up. I'm back into the Inspired Talks book, and Swamiji says something here that I really enjoyed hearing. He says, violent attempts at reform always end in retarding reform. Do not say you are bad. Say only you are good, but be better. Priests are an evil in every country because they denounce and they criticize, pulling at one string to mend it until 2 or 3 others are out of place. Love never denounces, but ambition does. There is no such thing as righteous anger or justifiable killing. If you do not allow a man to become a lion, he will become a fox. Woman is a power, only now it is more for evil because man oppresses her. She is a fox, but when she is no longer oppressed, she will become a lion. Ordinarily speaking, spiritual aspiration ought to be balanced through the intellect. Otherwise, it may degenerate into mere sentimentality. Do you see there's some really great things in there, some real little nuggets of gold to be taken and run with. First of all, this idea of reform, of, pointing fingers, oh, you're doing it the wrong way, it needs to be done this way. Where you start by finding fault in the world around you. And this is where Swami Arupesha's lecture this morning really took me to a great place. He said, he talked about his experience in a Buddhist monastery and as being the junior-most monk, having to salute or to prostrate before all of the senior monks. And he said he knew that some of the senior monks were like, good-for-nothings, as it were, that they weren't really living the life of a monk. And he felt like it was really insincere to bow down before them or to give them that kind of respect when you didn't really feel that kind of respect for them. And he talked about the different ways that he tried to find to make peace with that. And it was really beautiful what he did. He really started looking for the strengths in those monks. And he would bow down to those strengths in them. And so he trained his eye to see the good in everyone. And I see Swamiji talking about the same thing here. Not to walk around with a critical eye, even if you're going to give, helpful criticism. Don't give criticism. Look for strengths and fan those strengths. Say you're doing great, do better. You're wonderful, be better. Always just take the eye and put it higher up on the ideal. Don't draw the attention to faults and to weaknesses and to poor spots in a person, but find that means of respecting them. He broadened that by the end of the lecture about talking about another strategy, which is to see the divine in everyone, but that's a little bit more of a mature response. That's a little bit farther down the line of practice or sadhana for most of us. But looking for good things in each other is something all of us can do, to really train our eye to see the good and not the faults in others. He talks here that what happens is that when you focus on evil things or bad things or weaknesses, and you go in and you try and pull those strings out, he says you pull other ones loose. The problem just moves, because you need that inspiration. You need to take that eye and place it higher on the ideal so that we're called into greatness and not beaten into greatness, not driven like an ox. But led to higher things by being inspired. He goes on to say that love never denounces, and we read that in 1 Corinthians. Do you remember? Love always builds up. Knowledge puffs up. Ambition puffs up. You become proud, and that is what denounces. That's what puts others down so that you stick up higher. But love always builds up, always hopes, always believes, always trusts. Love never fails. And so it's that real effort on our part, in our children, in our spouses, in our lovers, in our friends, to always be looking for the great in them and fanning that greatness, encouraging them to be better by recognizing that greatness. He goes on here, he says that this idea that if you don't allow a man to express his strengths, or a woman, he makes a very specific point here about men and women, that we have to be allowed to grow and allowed to experiment and allowed to try things, to make mistakes, and not to be beaten for them or not to be denounced for them, but to make these earnest attempts at greatness. We're going to fail at times. Your children are going to fail. Your wife, your husband are going to fail at times. But we don't pay attention to that. We always are grateful for the effort and bring out the inspiration for doing more and doing better, reaching greater heights. And he makes a point here that if you don't, if you're too strict in your friendships, too strict with your children, too strict with your families, you turn them into foxes. They're going to find ways of pursuing what they want to pursue, and they'll just do it in diabolical, little deceitful ways. They'll get their way. Don't turn the people that you love into foxes. Don't turn them into people that have to come up with devious ways of being who they are. Let them be who they are, and then inspire them to be better. And he talks particularly about women here, which I find very interesting, because certainly many of the traditional religions of the world make woman into a cunning character, a fox, someone who's devious and manipulative behind the scenes. And women really get the brunt of that, especially in Christianity. They're pretty much blamed for everything with Eve in the garden. And here Swamiji is pointing out a very serious truth, that may be factually true. Women may have developed some cunning, conniving means for manipulating their men. But it's not because that's their nature. It's because men have oppressed them. Men have put them in a position where they have to be conniving to be heard, where they have to be clever to overcome the obstacles that men have put in their way, in their development. And so for us as men, it is good for us to appreciate the qualities of womanhood, to really lift them up and really praise them, because they are an amazing force in our lives, an amazing inspiration for us in our lives. And it should be vice versa also. It should always be that way. It should be a deep respect amongst people for each other. And that's what this builds. That's what these kinds of lessons build in us, is that respect for each other, so that we don't have to go around dividing the world into good and bad, likes and dislikes. But we can go around seeing the beloved and learning to see strength, learning to see greatness, and learning to feed that greatness. And he says in this devotion and in this practice that really we should temper our spiritual aspirations with our intellects. Intellect is a very important tool in spiritual life. Faith is not contradictory to it, not healthy faith anyway. Belief is not contradictory to it, not healthy belief anyway. So use your intellect to take you higher and to discriminate, to discern with what is right, what is wrong, what is best, what is better. And go forward. Become that great person that you are. What's that bumper sticker? Be the person your dog thinks you are.